to Tell Me More with me, CJ Quarterbaum. Tell Me More exists to help bridge the gap in our intergenerational workplace dynamics and to build better leaders. I love what we do here because what we're doing is we're trying to create a better world. And today, because work is such a big part of our world, sometimes we have to figure out how do we survive toxic workplaces? How do we survive rough bosses? And so I get the joy today of having a conversation with Fela Rosa. Fela, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, CJ.
So tell me about yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? And what do you do now?
So, I am originally from Germany. I live in Florida in the US right now, and I'm a career coach specifically for high performers that are currently in toxic workplaces.
That's good. How did you get into this line of work?
Honestly, I wanted to become a coach long time ago already. And it was always kind of an idea that I had in the back of my mind to myself. And a lot of things, came together in my life where I was like, I think now is a good moment for me. I was already married, so I had like my partner who I knew would support me in the beginning of building up my business. I did not have a family just yet. So I was like, okay, if not now, when then? Because oh God, I'm 35 now, so I'm like, how much longer can I really wait to actually do this and go for what's important to me as well. I always loved coaching for myself. I loved coaching, and then I was in leadership positions and I loved coaching my employees, but I've also seen there's some limit to that if you stay within the corporate hierarchies in terms of coaching. On the one hand side, not everybody really wants to grow that tremendously, which is also right now why I'm focusing more on high performers, because they just have this inner drive to really continuously grow as much and as quickly as they can. And on the other hand, you also have the political stuff to go on. Like, even if I wanted all of my employees to have a raise, I'm not sure I can really do that, right? So there are definitely limitations to coaching your own employees. So I was like, okay, I think now's the time. I've been working in a startup. I basically was looking forward to also the bootstrapping to be able to create my own story around that, right? And just experience and also see, can I do it? Can I really do it? So yeah, that's how I ended up here.
You are doing it and you're doing well. I came across your work, of course, on Instagram, where we come across everything. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was you're not just coaching people in toxic workplaces, you're coaching high performers in toxic workplaces. And I think that is significant because when you are a high performer in a toxic workplace, it can kill your confidence, crush your identity. So, how do you help people navigate that part of it?
Yeah, so there's a lot to it and a lot to unpack, right? And it always depends on when people come to me. Obviously, most of us, just like with any other issue that we have in our lives, we start doing something when it's pretty late already in the process, unfortunately. It's similar with any other health issues or whatever you can think of, right? Starting to do sports, everything. But once somebody reaches out to me, we take a look where they're currently at. Most of the time, we first really try to get those people out of survival mode, because this is what actually creates a lot of the health issues then as well. It creates a brain fog. It's like, if you're in constant survival mode, I always tell them it's not made for this. Like, survival mode, like back in the days, and I am not a scientist, but just easy, right? Like, why did we have survival mode in our brain if like a predator is around the corner and we need to run? So the only thing that we're able to do at this moment is just run and do anything that we can to survive, literally. Now, this is not meant to be an ongoing situation for years. That just doesn't make sense, like, oh, the adrenaline, the cortisol, all of these nice things are not meant to be constantly in our bodies. So that is the first thing that we need to get out of the survival mode. And it's a process. And depending on where the people are already, then important is as well, like, why did they end up in the situation, right? Why didn't they listen to the red flags and all of this? And just as you said, especially high performers, I would definitely consider myself one as well, in terms of how I navigated my career and my drive, just that I feel like my internal motivation, just that I have. It's really easy if you're a high performer and you're so motivated to have good grades in school, to excel at whatever you do, because you get a hang of it. And then once you find out how to actually navigate, it's really easy in the beginning. You're very successful. And then everybody's patting you on your back, like, oh, CJ, such a great job here. Oh, CJ, so great what you did there. At this moment, it's really tough not to make your achievements and your outer successes part of your personality and identity, right? So this is like the critical moment already. But as long as you're successful, it's fine, right? You feel great actually getting all of this acknowledgement and all of these outside, you know, supporters and people that admire you and your work. Now, once then you are in a situation where you would consider your workplace to be toxic, right? It's not like a general term, it's relative. But if it's toxic to you, potentially most of them have some issue with their boss, then they do not get that, exactly that. If it's really a bad environment, they might even be set up for failure, literally. And then what happens? They go back to their old coping mechanism of, what if something's not working, I need to work harder. If I'm not advancing here, I need to be more, be available all the time. They start to then integrate all of these negative habits that they didn't necessarily need all the time before. They were like emergency strategies to just, turn this ship around. So then they try that with somebody that actually really doesn't want them to succeed. And this is when they start running in circles. At some point, they kind of feel this doesn't work, so they panic even more. They go into a downward spiral and they get really close to burnout, because then at some point, as said, with the survival mode, the brain fog, these kinds of things start to happen as well. And then they feel like their confidence slips because they're like, I cannot even trust my own mind anymore because I cannot get a straight sentence out at this point. So that is then the crucial part where a high performer sets him or herself basically up for failure, because their coping mechanism to a toxic workplace is trying to fix the system or get it done anyways or convince the boss to actually like them. And this is when it's basically downhill, and where I hope to be able to help the people to not stay in this situation, but to actually take a step back and take a look, what do I really want? And is this in an environment where I can be successful? So they start doubting themselves instead of questioning the system.
Mm. I think that's how a toxic workplace gets you, right? It, we're not toxic. The issue is you. You didn't understand. You didn't do the right thing. You misheard us. You came with the wrong expectations. And if you're a high achiever, a high performer, you're right. You kind of default back to who you were in high school. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to study harder. I'm going to do better. But Philip Holmes says this: you cannot work your way back into the good graces of a toxic workplace.
Yeah.
So how do you get people to see that distinction, that the issue is not you, it's the place?
Well, it really depends, obviously, from case to case. But also, I want to add that a toxic workplace, as said, is subjective, because perhaps, I mean, sometimes it might really be, especially if you're in management higher up, that somebody just that is important doesn't want you there. So it's really like a strategic thing to get you out. This is one thing, like what can be a toxic workplace. But there are also toxic workplaces where people just don't feel good at all. And it can be a complete mismatch of values, right? It doesn't, and what I want to say with that is a toxic workplace does not have to be a toxic workplace for everybody. It can also be just one for me, because my values are not at all aligned with what's going on here. And I try to not listen to myself and listen to my gut. Now, can you repeat the question again, please?
I remember. How do you help people distinguish that the issue is not them, but it's the environment they're in?
Yeah. Okay. It's, genau. Thank you. So it's the environment or the fit, right? If we phrase it like that, honestly, the most important thing is, as said, always starting to get out of survival mode, because it's really hard to have a clear thought when you're full on in survival mode. And once we're out of survival mode, the important thing here is really to zoom out and take a step back, which is the opposite of what we're doing when we're trying to survive or trying to please somebody. So taking a good step back and taking a look at, why is this actually not working? Sometimes it's crystal clear, right? Sometimes it's just like, this boss really doesn't want me there. They have indicated me on several instances. What is always good advice is starting documenting things, because this forces us to stay neutral about what's going on. So if somebody documents already, we can go through that, for instance, and see, is already documentation like a neutral, fact driven documentation, or is it a very personal one? And that way we can figure out what is actually behind that. And once we understand what the issue is, it's already kind of a relief a little bit for the people, right? Because most of the time, as you said, it's not really something you're like not a wrong and you're not a stupid person for not making it in that kind of environment. Perhaps it's a just complete mismatch or it's really they don't want you there. So if it's like a bigger organization, there might be shifts inside the organization possible. If it's a smaller one, probably not. But already being aware of that, that actually this is not a long term thing, is kind of at first they need to go towards it to be able to consider it. And once they do, it's kind of a relief because actually I don't need to make it work. Whew. Like, okay, well, now what? Okay, now we can take a look at how you want to actually create your career because again, even though we are in hierarchies and there are definitely processes and rules to that, you, every single person that is working somewhere is their own CEO of their career, is their own creator of their career. Nobody is forced right now to stick around in a workplace that they don't want to go, especially in the US, depending on what state. You can literally go in tomorrow, bring all your stuff, drop it off, and be like, I'm done. It's not everywhere the same, but in some states, definitely you can do that. And this is also a lot of power, and we tend to forget that. So once
How do
we,
you help people see that? Because I think people so often they feel powerless in their career and in their job. As life happens, it's like, well, I have to pay this bill and I have to do this thing, and I don't know if I can just up and quit. How do you help people navigate that?
yeah, I would always say, and it's not necessarily what people want to hear, but it's always a step by step thing. You need to basically, in some way, gain back control of the things that you actually can control. And you said it so well, expenses. Most people can easily cut down on expenses a lot. So once you understand and you cut down a little bit, you're like, oh, actually, I can put a few $100s aside each month. Oh, actually, I can build up some, cash cushion that brings me some peace of mind already. So I'm not that much in survival mode anymore. So, your confidence already increases a little bit. So, oh, okay. Now we take a look at your routines. Are your routines setting you up for success? Routines that help you getting out of survival mode, but also routines to create a plan B and execute on that. That alone, starting to plan your exit, is a power move. It's just internal. Nobody knows about that, but it's a power shift because you become aware again. You can network already while you're at the job, right? And you can already see, oh, actually, I do have a pretty good network. Actually, my old bosses, they would still love to work with me. Perhaps there's not a position open right now, but already that feedback gives you a lot of power and confidence. So it's a step by step thing, right? But the important thing is we need to go out of this routine and mode that really keeps us trapped. But this is our job. And it's like, at some point it shifts because at some point we're like, oh, I feel powerless. So I just give everything over to you. Like everything is your fault. And then we're even more trapped. So we need to claim back what is already ours. And by claiming that back and being like, oh, actually, I can already, now that I'm aware of my finances, I know, okay, I could actually go 3 months without a job. Interesting. That means if in the meantime I just get a job that gives me half the money that I make now, I can go 6 months with this job. This is a long time to figure things out. If you don't have a family, I mean, perhaps even if you have, you're like really like a full on person, but let's say you don't have a family, you can even sublet your apartment and go for 3 months to Thailand. You're going to spend way less money. Like there's a lot of options nowadays, but we don't really consider them because we believe in being trapped and we believe in being stuck, but we're really not. There's a lot of options. The great thing is I love to work with ChatGPT with my clients. I just get them some ideas like, have you ever asked ChatGPT something like that? Why not? Right? You can
Well, I
just
love the way
literally
you're
throw
thinking
anything
here.
out there and tell me, give me 50 different ideas how to get unstuck.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and this is, I think, in the AI revolution, this is the way we should be using these tools, not to think for us, but to help us process a lot of the thoughts that we're having. Like, I would have never thought oh yeah, maybe I just moved to Thailand for a year. And so I have kids. Maybe I let them go to school in Thailand for a year. I homeschooled them from Thailand for a year.
Yeah, you have
I
time
went,
now,
yeah,
you know?
right. Like I went to Bali a couple of months ago, and you're right. Everything is so much cheaper over there. And at worst, they get a year experience of something different. And I think for a lot of people, we feel bound to the places that we are. So we don't recognize that there is a whole world open to us. I think the average person dies within 20 miles of where they're born.
Oh, wow, I had no idea. I mean, it makes sense, but I have never heard that. This Yeah, and the world is open, and yes, of course, and, the thing is, once you are feeling trapped, you find all the reasons why not to. So it's more of this slight, constant mindset shift to give you the power back, and then, yeah, perhaps you do need to figure out a visa, but all of these things are figure outable. You're a freaking high performer, you can do this, It's just about where you allocate also your mental resources, right? And then is there a way in between while you still figure things out to actually use this moment in time to learn how to set boundaries in a way that works for you, right? Is there a way that you use this weird in between time where you have to go somewhere that you really don't want to go, where you can learn just to go in, do your job, not care, go home, not care. Can you learn that? If you can learn that now, that will be a gift for the rest of your life and career. You know? So
Yeah.
I'm like toxically positive in some ways, but it's just the way I go, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I
I
can't hold
think
back. There's always an
yeah.
opportunity in something.
So I like this conversation because I'm the opposite of you. I'm probably toxically negative and I'm just like, no, this sucks. This is bad. I'm stuck. What are you gonna do? But you're so right. Even this idea of setting boundaries. What can good boundaries at work look like for the high performer in this space?
It's normal. It's basically easy. Setting boundaries is not hard. The stories that you make up in your head about the boundaries is hard. And yes, of course, your boss doesn't want you to put on boundaries, right? They want you to work as many hours as possible. But the thing is this, if you're in a workplace that you really hate, what is the worst case? That they fire you? And if they fire you, you might even get severance perhaps. So is that your worst case scenario that you're thinking about right now? Sure, I wouldn't tell that if somebody has like even debt, zero cash, like nothing at all, then it's a process. You need to build that up. Okay. And you can then approach also the boundary setting, perhaps a little bit more timid in the beginning, but you can start also here, small steps. It I know it kinda sucks, but small steps are like the key to anything, like anything, right? And you do have children, and I have a little boy now too, and it's just so amazing to look at them, how they celebrate every small step. Like, can you get a little bit back to that kind of mindset and just celebrate every little step? And for the boundaries, one little step can literally be on Friday evening, I clock off at 5:30 and I do not watch my phone the whole night. Okay, it's like a little boundary. Then next step, okay, I don't watch it for the whole weekend. Great, right? And then, okay, perhaps you can do Monday too. It doesn't mean that you work less while you're in the job, right? It doesn't mean you say no to any new project which pisses everybody off right around you. It doesn't have to be the hard stuff in the beginning. Just try it out a little and okay, because Friday is a bad day. Perhaps you figure out your boss is actually clocking off regularly at the same time every Tuesday. Oh, interesting. Why don't you do the same thing, right? You know what I mean? Like work your way around it a little bit. As said, use um all of your brain cells for you, right? Instead of against you, right? You're there because like all high performers, there's something about them. They are driven, they are very smart, they know how to figure things out. It's just this negative spiral that we need to get out of. And we get out of that one step at a time. And once you start to feel that this is actually a positive impact on you, your life, if your wife gives you a great feedback, oh, you changed, you're more fun at home, you're laughing more again, anything really. So it will be a small feedback on the outside, but inside it will feel like a huge success because you just gained back control over your narrative or your story.
Yeah, I love that idea of controlling the narrative because we are creatures of narratives. We are creatures of the stories that we tell ourselves, of the
Yes.
stories that have been told to us. And because work is such a big part of our lives, sometimes the story that our bosses and our managers and our leaders are telling us can really impact who we are at our core. And a
Yes.
big part of that change is going to be regaining control.
Yes.
How do you
May I
get
come in and say something
Yeah,
about that?
go.
Well, that is like the whole deal. And this is why, honestly, this is why I'm like so weirdly positive. It's also my personality type, but still, it's like sometimes we need to be hit really hard to understand that the way we do things is not the way that makes us happy and fulfilled.
Say that one more time.
Well,
Man, that was good.
sometimes we need to be hit really hard to understand that the way we do things does not make us happy or fulfilled. And especially in terms of the narrative and the stories that we tell ourselves. Once you are in this horrible workplace, you do understand that nobody's gonna save you except if you freaking save yourself. And once you saved yourself, you're like, oh, oh, I can't change anything in my life, which is the truth. You can't change anything in your life. You can marry or get divorced or have more children. Okay, have less children is not possible, but like there's a lot of things that you can 100% control. But as you said, we start to believe that we cannot. And I think this is like the biggest gimmick of our times, right? That we think we are in a system that we cannot beat, when in reality, there are way more systems out there than just this one. There are a lot of people doing freelancing gigs, working less than in their corporate job and making the same kind of money with less work because they understood their value and they put in the work to market themselves, build up the network, and just stick to it.
So
Right?
this leads to a good follow-up question, because I know so many people who want to do that. They want to do what you've done. They want to do what that high performer jumping into the freelancing world has done, but the road, it's often an unpaved road for them. So what's some good advice or tips for someone who's looking to make that jump, but they don't exactly know how?
Yeah. Honestly, you know what? I was going so all in. I said, "I'm coming from Germany." At some point, we didn't know if we're gonna get a new visa, how is it all gonna work out. I was so all in on this because I feel this is truly, at least for the next few years of my life, this is my mission to help people here. If I have to move back in with my parents, I'm gonna do it. I don't care. I'm so at the IDTAF kind of situation. I'm like, even if I have to move back in with my folks, I don't care. And I will I will do this anyways. And I will give it at least 3 years until I make a decision. And even if I do go back at some point, it will be my decision to go back. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I will not bow down if any HR person telling me that this is looks like a gap. No, because it's not. I worked my freaking ass off. Go look at my social media. Go look at my YouTube. Like you see that I've been working. And this is actually also the thing, right? This is what, yes, on the outside, if anything happens, gives me the acknowledgement that I was actually really trying it and not just saying I do something and not doing it. But more importantly, it was proving to myself that I'm actually doing this. And I will not stop until this thing is successful, you know? But it's also, I mean, you can do that with anything, right? I was just writing with somebody who wants to become an interior designer. But for me personally, it was also about the helping. Like if I can combine my crazy work ethic, my marketing skills with helping people that actually are suffering right now, what? Like, why would I give up on that?
It's the dream. It's using all of the best things about yourself to do something you love in the service of others. That is that's the dream. Are there any books or resources you would recommend to someone starting out to maybe learn some of these skills?
Some of the skills to start out. Um, oh God, I've read so many books. Not lately, but in my past. I think my journey to being here where I am right now, it started easily 10 years ago, right? I was doing a lot of online classes myself, learning about money, learning about entrepreneurship. I was only doing that honestly because I wanted to be successful in my career. That was how it all started. But I was then learning about communication. I was learning about negotiation. How do I sell my own skills? Because I knew that this is important in a career. But now it pays off double, right? Because I can still use that. Um, Great books. Definitely back in the days loved the 4-hour work week. Not because I want to work that less. I actually like to work. That's just a crazy thing about high performers too. Most of them do like to work actually. But he was really good in explaining systems, like how to set up systems. Um, I love listening to podcasts, anything that goes like the Diary of a CEO, anything that I could find, really, I was listening to that. I was like, honestly, near in my like back in the days, I used Spotify. In the end of the year, they would give you a summary. I had like 85 or 90% of anything that I was listening to were podcasts. And they were not like podcasts, people talking about politics, like something perhaps interesting, but that I can really do nothing about. It were all podcasts about like self help, career podcasts, entrepreneurship podcasts. I was just devouring it. So it was like a long process, but I think it's great because through doing that, I actually found out while listening, while driving to my job, what really excites me because I could feel it listening to him. I was like, what did he just say? I think I need to go back 30 seconds and listen to that again. Did I get, yeah, and that way you can also start to reconnect with your body again, be like, wow, actually, this did something to me, right? I could like feel that this was like the best podcast ever. I was so into careers back then, obviously, right? Which is why I wanted to do career coaching too. I was reading a career book, actually a great one. And I would also recommend it for men just because of the title. It's by Dr. Louis Frankel. It's called Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. And it's actually not, and she always says that the title is obviously a little provocative considering it's probably 20 or 25 years old, right? So they didn't have any clickbait back then. But it was about not being nice girl, but being a winning woman. Like because women often have this girly touch to them, and it doesn't really help if you want to be in the corner office. But it's a great book. I read this book, I devoured it as well. And I remember my birthday, it was probably my 26th birthday or something. My family was there, my brother, wife, my parents. And all I could do was for 1.5 hours talk about this freaking book. And I was so excited and I was so enthusiastic. And I was like, and then she was talking about this. And I see that all the time in my work. And this is like, and I was just giving them like a lecture. Then, I was so into it that only like at the end, I was like seeing in their faces, they really didn't care. I mean, it was my birthday, so I was allowed, I guess, to do it. But this is when right? When you cannot shut up about something. I was
Yes.
once even telling a friend of mine who I thought was interested in careers. There was like a wedding, and I was telling her about the book. I was like telling her about the things that I think she needed to know because she was good but wasn't paid enough. At some point, she was like getting up and walking away from me. I was like, oh, I think it's too much. I need to
You know,
consider creating an audience that actually wants to hear that stuff.
but there's something in that, right? The things that light you up and get you excited and you can't help but share. What I tell people in their 20s, because you're talking about this mid-20s time, is if you're not going to be a doctor, lawyer, one of those kinds of jobs where it's kind of a straight line path, spend your 20s figuring that out. What
Yeah,
are those things that light you up? Collect
yeah,
skills, collect experiences, collect people, collect information, and it's all going to come together. And now here you sit 10 years later and you're doing the thing that you had been laying the groundwork for, even if you didn't realize it at the time.
exactly. And this is the great best part. I'm looking back and like, this all adds up. If you told somebody, they would be like, you knew. No, I did not know anything. I didn't. I could never have imagined it. I live with my French husband in Florida and we have a son, and like I'm starting my own business. And actually, in order to start our own business, we were going back to a more traditional model because in the beginning of starting a business, I didn't make any money. So I was home with the baby, working whenever he's sleeping and trying to figure it all out until my husband's home so he can take over. But he was paying for everything, like I would never have guessed. And it's, you know, and and the weird thing is then, yes, I was going back to a model that was probably the opposite of what it looks like. But in reality, you need to just be flexible. Let's stop thinking black and white and just do whatever works. You know?
Yeah. But see, I think that is a key trait of high performers. It's the ability to think, to have that cognitive flexibility, to say
Yes.
there's more than one way to skin a cat. I don't have
Yes.
to do it this exact way. There's another way.
exactly. And it's so exciting. And I'm like, and now that this like, it feels like this portal is open. I'm like, sometimes I tell my husband, can you imagine where we might be in 3 years? Perhaps we live in Asia. I would love to live in Asia at some point. Perhaps we can, travel and stay longer somewhere else and just discover more places. And, like, all of a sudden, now that this big step has been done of us moving here and starting the business, now it's like, wow, what else might come? It's so exciting again to live this life. It's like crazy, right? Because if I had stayed where I was, and it's not at all a judgment, it's just for me, that would have taken away a lot of excitement in my life if I had stayed in a normal path. I come from a small village. Everybody has, like, after they start working, there's a little bit of partying. Then you buy your own home that is way overpriced right now. You pay that off for the next 50 to 60 years. And yeah, sure, you have a family and you have a great life. I would not be sad if I did that, but there's just this big part of me that is an adventurer, and this part would have needed to be shut down. And I think that is not healthy. So I'm really happy that we dared to make the move and we dared to make the jump. And all that you can see is like, oftentimes, what is the worst case? If you consciously decide, I want to try this out, I give myself 3 years, and you make it, and you're not succeeding, at least you've tried, right? So you've tried. You've definitely learned a lot of stuff along the way, and definitely learned a lot of things that you can market on a marketplace. But if you, yeah, so the sorry, I'm gonna get back and try it back together with the potential clients or the clients that I have right now. Even if my shit doesn't work, I can always go back to corporate, and I go back fully aware that I am again the CEO. I decide. I can switch back anytime. And I would never ever have somebody take away my mental health, for instance. Whereas the people that think it's dangerous to start something on your own, or it's dangerous to actually go after what you really want. And it can be a corporate job. Don't like it doesn't have not everybody is cut out to be an entrepreneur, and that's totally fine. I'm not sure yet 100% how I'm gonna be making it, right? But at least I don't run into burnout because of the dream of somebody else in a workplace that doesn't suit my values and doesn't fit me. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. I think we're wired in very similar ways.
yeah,
There's an innate just kind of hunger for more
yeah.
and almost an innate sense of purpose that says, no, I know that I'm supposed to do more than this. There's a path that is laid out before me where people where I'm from, this is what they do, but that's not me. And I have to at least try. And I think that there are so many people in this world who are wired the way we are, but society, culture, where they're from tells them, no, you can only walk this path. And I don't know what the world is missing out on from these people because they never made the step that you were brave enough to take.
And but you know what? Like, so easy to start a side business in the USA.
Yeah,
And then
it
in
really
addition
is.
to that, what I also want to say is not everybody, I said, has to become an entrepreneur. Like, you have an impact if you want or not. You have an impact on the people around you. Only like speaking energetically, right? We know like that my energy doesn't stop here on my shoulders and here, right? There are like pictures that prove that. So if you want or not, you do have a direct impact on your surrounding. Like, and it does not matter where you work, what your title is. Just today, we had maintenance in our apartment to help us with some stuff. I had a great conversation with the person, really nice guy. If he has, I don't know him personally, but if he is that nice to everybody, then he was with me and has that great conversations. He's going out of every apartment, not just having fixed a lot of stuff, but with great energy because he was contributing to making people happy that day. Perhaps to somebody that was all day alone in home office and was their first in-person conversation that day. And this guy has such a bigger impact than just repairing stuff.
That's
So
so
like
good.
it doesn't
Yeah.
really matter. You have an impact if you want it or not, you have an impact already. Like, do you use it consciously or do you just float along?
Mm. I think a part of that is us recognizing that work is what you do. It's not who you are. And
Yes.
who you are is going to go with you in the office, out of the office, at the gym, at the grocery store. And for many high performers, they run into this issue of my identity is what I do. But if they can separate those two things and recognize, no, you are a full person,
Yeah.
then they get to bring that energy with them everywhere they go.
Yes. And CJ, I do not know you, right? We have not had a personal discussion prior to this. But I would, if I had to make a bet, I would say you're a spiritual person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge thing as well that adds to the equation. We kind of lost our spirituality, or we believed in thinking that spirituality means religion. And since it's very hard these days to find a religion that you 100% agree with, you're like, oh, I'm not spiritual. I'm a science person, which is like the weirdest thing ever if you think about it really thoroughly. But that's like, one of the like conspiracy theories or whatever that we have come to believe that we can also not be spiritual. Now, I say that because if you are spiritual, the whole thing, like, then it doesn't make any sense anymore that your whole identity is your job. It's just not possible. It's not possible that somebody else tells you who you are, who you're not, because you're, a human being that came here, like, and it's so weird because we always say body, mind, soul, but until like 10 years ago, I didn't even know what soul means. I was like, isn't that my mind? Like, isn't my soul the thing like that's talking to me? But what's the difference? I was so confused. I was like, I don't understand. But if you're like a little bit spiritual and you only just acknowledge, okay, perhaps there's a soul, then then you open yourself up to perhaps the soul is here to have an impact, to do something. Perhaps there's a reason why I'm here. And only that thought can change anything. And then you don't believe in that stuff anymore. Then you're like, if my soul is here for something, that I'm meant to do, like in a way to contribute, to help, or anything really, then it cannot be that just because of one boss that doesn't like me, I am worth nothing.
You make me think in this moment about this idea of resume virtues and eulogy virtues. We spend so much of our lives building up what's going to be on our resumes. But at the end of the day, we all die. And when we die, people aren't talking about our resumes. They're talking about who we are, who we were as a person, the impact that we had on the world. And that's soul talk. That is who who were you? What impact did you make? Did you see your life as worth more than the things you collected, as worth more than your job titles? So
And that's
yeah,
what
that's that.
everybody says whenever they do those interviews with like people that are about to die soon, basically, and they ask them, right, what is your regret? They never say, oh, I wanted to have a promotion. No, it's about the impact, the contribution with other people, like, or spending time with the family is also a huge, huge gift only because there's right now no money that you add to that. Like, you cannot see that in monetary terms, doesn't mean it's worthless. And I think that's the big shift that you need to make in our mindset. Like, only because I don't get money, it doesn't mean it's worthless, right? Because then you're like fully aligned. Then like every human being has the same innate worth. And you don't need to work for your worth. You don't need your boss's approval for that worth, right? You just have it because you are. Like, you know what I mean? That this is the
There-
meaning of innate.
there's an inherent dignity to humanity that we should all recognize. And I think
Exactly.
in a toxic workspace, you can feel that dignity being eroded away. You can feel people trying to step on that dignity. But if you know who you are and you can step back and go, you don't determine my worth, you don't determine my value, that stays and remains regardless of what happens here. You're able
Yes.
to just navigate those waters so much better.
Yeah. And you know what? This is one form of boundary. And you don't even have to communicate it. It's just your mindset is an internal shift that is probably one of the strongest boundaries that you can set for yourself. And the funny thing is that if you are that clear on your worth, on your innate worthiness, those toxic managers don't choose you as target. Most often
Mm.
they don't. Most often they will choose somebody else who doesn't have this innate worth. They might still want to get you out because they don't want this kind of people, but it's like the whole power set shifts if you get in knowing that.
So good. So to kind of wrap this conversation up, bring it to a close. Uh, I'm curious, what are three pieces of advice you would give someone for navigating a toxic workspace?
Okay. Narrowing it down to three pieces. So first, if this is giving you the most important lesson in your life thus far, what would it be? What is it that you are allowed to finally learn and acknowledge and embody for yourself, for your rest of your life, rest of your career, rest of your journey here, right? Because then if we get really, really, we reflect and we get really raw and honest with ourselves, very often, is we shouldn't attach again our self-worth to something on the outside. We should stand up for our boundaries, and it's okay if it doesn't work out. No, whatever it is for you, we shouldn't identify with something on the outside, whatever it is. But if you learn that lesson now, you will not have to learn it again. It will just be a new part of your life, of your foundation, basically, of your life. That's the first thing. Okay, let me think. What is the second thing? Mm, I hate always narrowing it down so much. And the second thing that I would love for people to learn right now is the ability to zoom out, because we get stuck in this small stuff. It's like, shoot, I have to make this presentation here and I need to pay the rent and I need to do this. Okay, that's all valid. But can you, in the beginning, perhaps grant yourself 1 hour on the weekend and zoom out and take a bigger look at your life as a whole? Like, where do you come from? What have you learned? Who have you become? And that way you will see so many more opportunities. It's hard to see opportunities when we're really, in our little box, in our little reality. It's just such a small part of the actual reality that exists out there, right? It's like minuscule. But we need to learn to zoom out in order to see the bigger picture. And that's when, and also, science will support that, because we have this thing like reticular activating system, right? This like our filter in our brains, because there's so much coming at us each and every single day that our brains automatically filter out stuff that our brain thinks are not relevant for us right now. Now, if you never learn to zoom out, you're always seeing the things that confirm what you're already living. But if you learn to zoom out, you basically help your brain. And this is my interpretation of this science stuff. Okay, but the way I see it is, if you learn to zoom out, you learn to switch the filters of your brain, right? And then you can actually actively shape the filters to see the things that bring you towards what you actually want, versus only seeing everything that keeps you stuck. Okay, so zooming out, huge, huge effect. When in doubt, zoom out. That's like the best coaching advice ever. It's like half of the coaching is only about that, honestly, always.
That's good.
And then, like, the third one, it's really hard to pick. And yeah, the third one, let's make it a little bit more about also what I do in my coaching, okay? Because the third one is this: your career and life, but let's stick on the careers. You need to see it as a whole. And what's happening is people are always and often only working on the outside. They work on their communication, on how they dress and look, how they talk, how they network. All of these things, great and important. They are outside things. If you do not do the inner work, you will create a gap. In my opinion, this gap you can call it imposter syndrome, because with this outside work, you might get to a position that you really don't feel you deserve because you didn't do the inner work. Then you have imposter syndrome. Then you have great pay, great title, but you feel like a little schoolboy still, right? Because you didn't do the inner work. So for me, in order to really create, I call it conscious career success, but just career success that makes you happy in a long term, fulfilled, you look back and say, this was a great career. I'm so happy with what I did and my impact. You need to have the outer work and the inner work. And the inner work is then what creates the foundation, actually. So it's so interesting that we don't do this always. Like, the inner work is the foundation. It's like the roots of a tree, but you decide how deep your roots are allowed to grow. And this is the resilience. This is the self-worth. This is also, in my opinion, also some spirituality to it. Like, can you have a big vision for yourself? Like, do you know why you're here? If you have these things, you actively basically make your roots grow. So if you're like a Floridian tree, like I see many here, you decide how deep your roots go. Yes, hurricanes may come, but the big trees with the strong roots, like the banyan trees that we have here, amazing trees. Can you imagine how many hurricanes they have survived? And yes, every time a hurricane comes, some of the branches, get away, especially the dried ones, but also some live branches will basically die in the hurricane. But a few months later, you will already see new branches coming out. You, you know, everything's starting to reflourish and actually new growth potential arises from that. But they don't flip over because of the hurricane because they have the roots. So for me, the roots is the inner work, right? Know who you are, know what you stand for, know your values, your vision, your right. This will create the resilience actually. This will make you unshakable. So if you have that inner work and you combine it with the outer work, with the communication, with how you show up, I think then you're up to something huge.
Philly, you're talking my language. So much of my coaching practice when I work with leaders is centered around the inner work. You are where you are because of all the outer things, but your leadership is struggling because there are things that are happening in here that you haven't worked through and haven't figured out. And we're all a mess. We're all broken. And what we tend to do is spill that brokenness out onto others. But if you can start to deal with what's in here, it'll transform you, it'll transform your relationships, it'll transform your leadership and your life. Philip,
Exactly. Yes.
thank you for this great conversation. Where can people find you?
On Instagram, my company's name is Corporate Warriors. And yeah, my website, corporatewarriors.io, but Instagram is probably easiest one. Fela Rosa and Corporate Warriors is all in the handle, I think.
I'll be sure to tag you, comments, all the things. I'm going to put out reels. People need to hear what you have to say. So thank you for joining me and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Tell Me More. Drop in the comments. Tell me what your experience has been like, not necessarily in the toxic workspace, but growing from it and learning from it and what has next looked like for you. And I'll see you next time as I ask you to tell me more.